Hello everyone, this video is going to be a showcase which was made possible thanks to my good friend Chris. He's an incredible 3D modeler and artist. Please go look at his Instagram, Project Timber01, a look through, it is awesome. So before we get to the bigger showcase of painting and assembling, the one known as Bruce, we're going to be taking a look at this small little guy. Pyvern is this little guy's name, and the sculpt and detail in the sky are quite nice. I absolutely adore how simple the sculpt is with this expression. It reminds me so much of those Godzilla Land characters with how cheapified it is. Honestly, take a look at like the original, then look at the little chibi, then look at the Godzilla Land one, then look at, well, you get the point. It's just a fantastic little guy overall, honestly. It's only a couple inches tall, but I really do like him. He's quite nice. But I'm gonna say let's get on to the main event. Alright, this is the main event. Meet Bruce. He was a kaiju who was designed, sculpted, and sent to me by my good friend Chris. He is a truly terrifying creature, an absolute alarming amphibian. His sculpt is absolutely just full of detail, from every spine littering him to the bumps and warts covering his arms. I really wish I could show it better, but I think it'd be better if I just get him primed and painted so you could really see what I'm talking about. Now, before we properly get to talking about his immaculate details and just the precision it must have taken to get to this level of like detail in the sculpt, I figured we should probably go over a good layer of primer with him to get him just ready for painting. So for priming, I'm going to be using, or at least trying out this. I bought this. It's called FX Primer Apparat, and it's, and I quote, "Flexible, non-cracking, non-peeling, no-tack, durable primer, ideal for pliable surfaces such as EVA foam and other costly materials such as thermoplastics and 3D prints." Honestly, that sounds like a perfect thing to use on a 3D print. So let's get started. Now we're just really applying a coat, honestly. I'm trying to get a good coat because coats are important to show off how good you can have a paint hold on to like a sculpt. And once we have a good coat added, honestly, I want to do a little color selection. So here's everything I have for the selection. Although some of it needs to be mixed perfectly with the color set. I've noticed he's got a bit more of a green that's less of a lime, but not exactly a dark green or like a light one. So it's you have to get the right balance, if that makes sense. Yeah, no. Main thing is just trying to start off with painting as lightly as possible. You want to get the lighter set on first, the under base, and then on that you want to build up the darker colors. It is infinitely harder to paint a dark color than it is to paint a light color. Because if you try to paint over a dark color than a light color, well, you just kind of, it's going to take so much more layers, or you could probably just scrape it off, but even then, doing that, you risk damaging the sculpt itself. Also, this might sound a bit odd to ask, but I'm kind of curious on anyone who's familiar with 3D printing, or 3D printed sculpting or painting is watching. Would you mind answering some questions for me? Because, first question, what's the best paint for 3D prints? Second question, what's the most flexible a print could be made? Because, what I'm curious on is when is something considered a print versus like a resin dip? I've seen that. I'm not too sure if there's a difference between them. I know that they're like different types of printers, but is it less of like a substance type thing, or is it more or less just like a material? I'm not too sure how to explain that, honestly. Also, the last one, is there any way to also have a printer essentially print color on the print too, other than it just like the filament being that color? Because, I don't know, it might sound a bit silly, but when I imagine 3D printing, I kind of imagined it like traditional ink printing, but I also imagined where it would just like layer on stuff as well, or it'd like, you know, the old textured paper that'd be in like some books or whatnot? I imagined it'd kind of be like that. I thought that's what 3D printing was for a little bit until I found out, nope, you can just make full-on figures. Yeah, just goes to show how little I know about this. I'm more of a traditional sculptor. I just do clay and like latex and resin and stop motion shenanigans, honestly. So, yeah. Yeah, now we're just mostly just trying to get on this good first coat of primer. It's very important that we have it on because it's everything's built on this. This is literally the foundation of a paint job. You can't have a good paint if you don't have a good prime layer. Just trying to move around and make sure I get all of his areas under his knees, anywhere I could miss. He's very spiky, so I had to actually try to find brushes that can navigate in between his spikes or things like that. I actually pricked my finger a couple of times working with him. I have some small cuts on the front of my finger. I did not know 3D prints would be this sharp. Sorry, I don't know what's wrong with vocabulary today. Yeah, no. It's like I've held sea urchins in. I've held sea urchins, and they've felt less like spiky as some of these 3D printed sculpts can be. I had no clue they could have been like this spiky. Also, if you notice, I have the patented. Well, I call it patented. The mat. It's a little foam mat, but it's the mat of painting because it's covered in spikes. And yeah, I had to go out and buy a whole new brush set just to get into some of these spike layers because I actually did not have a brush that was thin enough to slide in between there. I will say though, you can start to see, this is what I mean by some of the detail on him is extravagant. You can really start to see some of it just pop out and be more visible. And if you notice, I didn't put his tongue in his mouth for now because I wanted to actually come back to that. I'm going to do that later when I feel more confident in just having him be ready, honestly, because if his tongue is in his mouth, that makes up the risk of I can't get back there to properly paint the end of his mouth, so I just left his tongue out for now. I was going to come back and put that in once we have a good prime layer of his teeth and everything behind his gum line, basically. I was also tempted to prime him before I assembled him, but I wasn't too sure, so I just went ahead and assembled him first because I was worried of possibly not having all the prime be the same like coat size or coat layer. So I was worried one part might be like a bit thicker than another part. My understanding of 3D printing though has increased, honestly, just from, I keep saying honestly, my knowledge of 3D printing and its inner like mechanics and mechanisms are a bit iffy. I have a lot of friends who are interested in it. I know things like the New York libraries, for example, actually have 3D printers. Some libraries have 3D printers you can use for free. I know databases where you can get 3D printed materials for free, and those are honestly pretty fun because, I mean, it's a free database, so if there are models on there, it's usually a scanned thing that's physically in the museum you can use, and that's very fun. Yeah, just right now, been priming all these areas like the spines and the neck area, mostly just trying to make sure I'm not missing anything, because I'm really only going to get one real good shot at this. If I mess up with the prime layer and I have to redo that, that means I technically have to try to scrape it off, and given how delicate that 3D printed is itself, I don't want to do that. Some spikes were damaged actually during the mailing process, so I have to refix them, but that's just because I'm not too sure what he's made out of. But here's a good look at him once we've got a good prime layer going on him. This took about 4 or 5 layers off camera, but yeah, I still have to do the hand a bit more here, but just look at him in his entirety. He is immaculate. This is what I mean when you can really start seeing some of that detail start popping off. You'll see more of it when we get to the actual painting process, but it becomes so much more prominent, like the wrinkles in his skin, and just, he is a fantastic sculpt. They did amazing with this. My good friend Chris is an amazing designer as well for designing this guy. He is just so gnarly, honestly. He's covered in spines and warts and little protuberances on his back, and his shoulders got the little like warty scales. Bruce is gotta be one of my. He's so simple, but he's also the silhouette of him is simple, as in it's like it's the man in a suit-esque shape, but the actual features which make up him and define him are in themselves so extravagant. Also, small fun fact, but actually only one species of frog has claws, so I thought that was very funny, because I remembered that. And then Bruce is a mutated pixie frog of some type. It goes with his color palette, but yeah, this is finally getting ready to add on the thing that adding on a ton was a bit scary for me, honestly. I was not too sure how this was going to go. I was very worried I was going to mess it up, or I was going to do something that could have messed it up. So it was a very, very slow process of just making sure that I did it exactly right. If I had messed up, there was a chance if I messed up, I'd have to basically pry it off before the glue fully set. The glue I'm using for this is super glue, as I found that's what 3D Sculpt is best work with, in resins entirely. I wasn't too sure if there would be a difference, because I know the different chemicals and everything. I was also very scared of just the glue melting into the sculpt. I've seen videos of like people trying to glue styrofoam together and then it just eats away at it because it has like the property of it just suck it up basically. Now that we have a good portion of the actual sculpt assembled, it's time we go back and we run in and we fill up all the gaps that are here. There are some gaps due to, every time you put a model kit, there's no perfect model kit. There's never going to be a perfect model kit. There's always going to be something you have to fill in. There's a neck gap, you have the gaps in the legs you got to fill up as well. There is the gaps near the ankles, and there's also the gaps near the hands. No mold's perfect, no model's to be perfect, but it's okay, that's the fun of it. So right now, I've been using, probably not the best filler, I'm using Crayola Lotto Magic, funnily enough, for this, because it works fast, and it is water dry, and if I ever need to change anything with it, I just literally have to dab it with water really quickly, and it takes a while to dry, longer than Milliput or anything like that. And I feel like I did a good job sealing up those seams, so now we're finally hitting it with a bit of green. We're hitting it with a spring green. This is like a very light green, but I still wanted it to be a good intermediary between the lime and light that Bruce is, so I can at least spray him with some lime green after that we have a good coat of this down. It's just a slow process trying to get in the spikes and areas. This is also, funnily enough, the same brush I used for the priming, although I just swapped to a different brush a little bit later on. You might see that if you're paying attention. I'm not going to tell you when, but keep your eye out on that. Yeah, trying to paint down there as minimum, make sure I'm missing nothing. One thing I will say that actually is very interesting to me about when it comes to, I don't feel like I'm the best painter when it comes to models. I'm more actually used to painting like latex, like flexible paints, like processed glue or latex paint. So painting a static figure actually was a bit more challenging than it would have been for painting like a posable figure to me. Mostly just because I'm used to being able to like pick up the arm and move it into a position to paint the arm how I want to paint it, rather than having to be a static figure that I can't operate with my own machinations of how I want to pose it. So it was actually a very interesting dilemma to try to conquer that as I'm going about this. But right now we're still just coating him in green. It ain't easy being green, but here he is almost fully coated. This took about almost full 2 hours just to properly get all this done now, and then here he is finally full coated. Yeah, took a while. We're gonna be jumping ahead just a little bit back and forth. Hitting him with the red finally for his spikes. This part was honestly very fun because I had to go through and look at how many different ways I could have done this. I could have either done one each individually, or I could have just mass sprayed all of them at once. And then Bruce, interesting enough, is a very interesting color scheme when it comes to this. He's got the other little side blotches, and I have to look out for that too. But for my guess on this, his main pattern system is like a pixie frog. So I'm trying to match that type of vibe with not just painting him like how you would paint him, but painting him so he would also feel organic, like he would feel like a true critter of some kind, of real varmint. Yeah, I swapped to a more individual based one here to try to fill up all the nooks and crannies. Here he is, properly painted, a good decent coat of red on him. This took a while. This was about almost a full week. And there's still some more I gotta do. But looking at all of his different color patterns, in different, like, not really color patterns, but ways people have drawn him, made me realize there's no exact way people drew the small penguins on him stylized repeatedly. So I wanted to mess around with that by just going for a similar look. Finally painted his gums and his underbelly. There's his more underbelly painted, gums reapplied. This is also the paper sheet that I used. This is all of his paint was on this, but enough of that. Time for the big reveal. Yeah, it was a spectacle paint to this. It was a 10 out of 10 model, and I did my best to give it a 10 out of 10 paint job. Painted as ton as best as I could, give him a good gloss at the end of it too. I just want to say, huge thanks again to my good friend Chris for this sculpt, for both of them, for both Pyvern and Bruce. Thank you so much for sending me this and letting me do a showcase. This was a fantastical chance, honestly, to just look at both of them. Also, please go look at his work. Once more, his socials are down below, and just go give him a look. He's an awesome guy, awesome artist as well. Yeah. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it, honestly. This has been one of my favorite videos I've ever made so far. Just one of my favorite projects I've ever worked on, because he's just I love this little dude. But yeah. Please go look at some of the other videos I've made and consider looking at some of my socials. And thank you. This would not be possible without viewers like you. Thank you.